I had been sitting in that waiting area for 40 minutes before I understood what I was looking at. My follow-up was a formality. The same trauma center that had put me back together 18 months prior, a routine check on the shoulder they had rebuilt. I was not in pain. I was not worried. I was watching the floor the way a man watches a river when he has nothing else to do, and I noticed her because she moved differently than everyone else. Not faster, just more deliberately. Each step placed, each decision already made before her foot came down. I had seen that walk before. I could not place it, and it nagged at me the way a half-remembered name nags. Present, important, just out of reach. She was a floor nurse. Her badge said so. Teal scrubs, stethoscope, a worn canvas lanyard pouch clipped below her ID. She was young, mid-30s at most, dark hair pulled back clean, the kind of composed face that gave nothing away. She was restocking a supply cart near the trauma bay when the double doors blew open and the world changed. The boy came in hard. 17 years old, the EMT said, the CEO's son, and everybody in that hospital seemed to know it in about 30 seconds. I learned later the father had already called the hospital director from the car. The attending who took the case was a sharp-edged physician named Carlisle, the kind of doctor who wore his authority like a second coat and did not invite questions about it. He moved efficiently, gave clean orders, and when the floor nurse rolled her supply cart 2 steps closer to the bay, doorway out of instinct, he looked up. Step back, he said. Not loud, not cruel, just dismissive, the way you wave off a bystander. We need the bay clear. This is above your assignment. She did not argue. She moved back 2 steps, exactly as he'd said, and stood there with her hands loose, at her sides and her eyes on the boy. That was all she did. I noticed because something about how she stood, the stillness, the focus, made her look less like she had been dismissed and more like she was, waiting for something she already knew was coming. For 6 minutes, Carlisle worked and the numbers held. Then they didn't. The monitor tone changed. A resident called out the pressure reading, and Carlisle adjusted, switched the approach, called for a second line. The tone changed again. The boy's color shifted. A grayish pull around his mouth I recognized from a different place, a different year, a far worse room. I sat up straight. She was already moving. She did not push anyone aside. She did not announce herself. She came through the bay doorway at a pace that was neither frantic nor slow and said, level and clear. He's tension. Let me decompress him. Carlisle turned. For a half second, he just stared at her, the floor nurse, the one he had waved off. Excuse me? Tension pneumothorax, she said. Left side. Breath sounds are absent. His pressure is in free fall, and it won't recover until the cavity is relieved. She was already pulling gloves from the box on the wall. I need a large bore needle, second intercostal space, midclavicular line. Right now. Carlisle started to speak. A resident to his left looked at the monitor and said very quietly, she's right. The tracing. Carlisle moved. He let her work. What happened in the next 4 minutes I will describe plainly, because it deserves plainness. She found the site, set the needle, and the boy breathed. Not a lucky guess. A sequence, each step deliberate, each one dependent on the last. She spoke the whole time in a voice so steady it seemed almost quiet. Colo pressures, checking the response, adjusting. When the tone on the monitor evened out and held, the room was silent for a moment, the way rooms go silent when something they didn't expect just happened in front of them. The boy's color came back. His chest rose and fell. Carlisle stood back. A resident behind him had both hands pressed flat on the counter, staring at the monitor as if it might change its mind. She stripped the gloves, dropped them, and stepped out of the bay the same way she'd entered. No drama, no pause for effect. She went back to her supply cart. I watched her check a row of IV bags as if she had just replaced a faulty bulb. That was when I placed the walk. A valley in Kandahar province. Autumn 18 months before this day. Our convoy had taken fire from a ridgeline we had cleared twice, and in the first 2 minutes we had 4 men down and a 5th bleeding out in the road. I was the 5th. I know what I know from other men's accounts, because I was not conscious for much of it, but I know a medic came out of the smoke and the noise while it was still happening, not after. She moved the same way, deliberate, pre-decided. She had packed my shoulder, controlled the bleed, and spoken to me in that same flat, steady voice while the fire was still coming in. 14 of us came out of that valley. I was one of them. Our sergeant told me afterward that she had been the last one out, on foot, carrying a man across her shoulders while she ran. She had received a decoration for it, a significant one. I knew the citation because our sergeant had read it to us, and the number in it, 14, was a number I carried with me the way you carry certain things, in the chest, not in the pocket. I stood up. I had not planned what to do next. I had started toward the nursing station when I heard the front doors of the trauma center open. The sound was distinctive, a kind of organized entry, multiple people, not frantic. I turned. There were 6 of them. A Marine honor guard in dress blues, moving in a double column, precise and unhurried. Behind them, a general, full dress uniform, service stacked 4 rows deep, his cover perfectly squared. He walked the way men walk when they have been in enough rooms to know that a room adjusts to them, not the other way around. He stopped at the nursing station. He did not consult a directory. He said her name, her full name, first and last, and asked which floor she was on. The desk clerk pointed, confused, toward the supply cart 20 feet away. The general turned. She had already looked up from the cart. She stood very still. I watched the CEO's man, the administrator who had arrived 20 minutes earlier, who had been stationing himself near the trauma bay doorway with his phone and his pressed suit and his pointed awareness that the CEO was watching. I watched him register the general's uniform, then the honor guard, then her face, and something shifted behind his eyes. Not embarrassment. Something older and quieter than embarrassment. He took a step back. The general crossed to her and stopped. He said something I could not hear from where I stood. She answered him, also quietly. He nodded once, slowly. Then he turned to the honor guard, and they came to attention. The administrator did not move from the corner where he had retreated. Carlyle had come to the bay doorway, and he stood there with his coat in his hand watching. The residents had gathered without planning to. The waiting area had gone entirely still. She did not smile. She did not square her shoulders for effect or look around to see who was watching. She stood in her teal scrubs with her worn lanyard, and she received the honor the way she had worked the bay. Steady, composed, nothing wasted. I moved through the small crowd until I was close enough. I am not a man who speaks in moments like this, as a rule, but I had been waiting 18 months to find her, and I was not going to let the moment pass. When the general had finished, when the honor guard stood at ease, and the small gathered crowd was beginning to breathe again, I stopped a few feet from her. She looked at me. I watched her eyes track my face, then my shoulder, then back to my face, the specific way a medic looks at a patient she remembers. Kandahar, I said. Second convoy. You carried Hernandez out on your back. A pause. Then she said, left shoulder. You wouldn't let go of your rifle. No, ma'am, I said. I would not. She held my eyes for a moment with that same steady look she had held everything else with all day. How's the shoulder, she said. Good, I said. Follow up. She nodded, like a woman who has heard good news and intends to believe it. Then she picked up her chart, tucked it under her arm, and went back to work. I sat back down in the waiting area. I did not look at the administrator, or at Carlyle, or at anyone else in the room. I looked at her, moving down the corridor, deliberate and unhurried, the same way she had moved in that valley, and I thought about the 14 of us who had come home. Some deaths do not have a currency, but that afternoon, in a trauma center on an ordinary Tuesday, I watched a room full of people begin to understand the size of one.